Start.
Good
Before we
day, good
start,
evening, good
It's okay.
night, and good morning. We have started already. And welcome to
It's
another
all right.
exciting episode of Reels Tennis
I can.
Podcast. We have been away bad, we have been far away, we have been delinquent. There is
We've
no
been in a
need
fucking
to
pandemic.
drag us. We put out two podcasts in a pandemic, Janina. That is not an excuse. What she's trying
Oh
to do
my
is
gosh,
cover
is that how
herself.
many we did?
No, he means
No,
like we did two
no
podcasts. We did
two
the tennis.
different
We did the
podcasts.
pod.
Oh,
We had a magic podcast and we had a real podcast. So
We
don't
ain't
don't
done shit in a long time.
okay. That's on you, Janina. That's always on you.
Yes, it
But
is. I will take full responsibility.
good. So Maya, please DM her directly. Don't tag
Do
me. Don't try to
not.
drag me out in the Twitter streets, Maya. Don't do that. So we are back, and as always, you know what the rule is. Whenever we're away, tennis goes to shit. So we need to save tennis. We need to have a regular podcast, okay? Even if we just
Jesus.
come on just to say, hey, the world is still going on in the pandemic and tennis is still around playing. We need to do that. But
All
before I go
right.
any further, let me introduce my co-hostesses with the mostesses. And of course, people, yes, we're going to get to what you think we're about to get to. If you saw the thumbnail, you know exactly what we're going to talk about. Let me introduce Andreen from Solely Tennis Travel. See, we haven't done this in a long time. I forgot, girl, where you from. Hey, girl, hey.
hey, how are you?
I am okay. And we have Janina from Farn, Ohio.
Hi. It's very cold here.
Okay, we're gonna put some pep in our steps, ladies. I don't like this
You know what?
this
Everything
energy.
is great. I have managed to stay COVID free. That's me knocking on wood. So yeah,
Well,
things are
that's
good.
good. And today, because we have so much crazy shit to talk about, and we brought back our lovely guest Pablo. I know you all love his sexy English accent, which I would write a thesis on how English people can say any crazy shit they want to.
And it just sounds good.
Maybe I don't want to get out crazy, but maybe some dictators should have been English, and they would have taken over the world. Just saying, Napoleon should have got an English accent instead. We have Pablo with us this evening. What's going on, Pablo?
good evening, and nice to join you again. It's a little wet in London, but then it's always wet in London.
That's not you, right? You're not wet. Just the weather. We're talking about the weather, Pablo, right? We're talking about the weather.
As just a little bit of me is wet, but we'll get to that
Y'all
later.
gonna cut it out right
No, we will
now.
not get to that later, Pablo. This is a children's family hour, okay? And as I
Exactly.
said,
Maya tells us not to cuss, so we won't.
Oh boy.
okay, yeah, because Maya listened to us as she's cleaning with her daughter, and
hmm
I want her daughter to do
No,
chores. I
sorry,
don't want
Reels.
Maya to.
You mean Maya listens to us while her daughter's cleaning? Yeah.
Well, I
That
mean
sounds
that
about
don't get
right.
happen if Maya's listening to us. Well, yes, that's how I tell her to set it up. And of course, we have Reels, the homosexual of the podcast. And ladies and gentlemen, um, I've been instructed from the powers on B, which is Andreen, that we have to keep this to a nice, sexy hour. And Janine is already complaining about sleeping. And I can confirm Pablo is a vampire because I do not know when Pablo sleeps. So
Pablo doesn't sleep.
No, I go all night.
wow. Look out, boys of London, okay?
Oh shit.
So yes, so we came back, upon special request. We've been trying to do, podcasts before, but things couldn't align, a lot of things happen, Unfortunately, the world still continues beyond our podcast. I know. It's crazy, that anything could be more important than a podcast. But so we decided to kick things off. Well, we didn't kick things off. Noli decided to kick things off for us this year with
Oh
a
Lord.
shit show and a half.
Yeah, this is not how we anticipated starting our eighth season. It's our eighth season.
Although
don't think you
I
can
celebrate it, I feel like this is exactly what the pandemic deserves. So let's just
Let's
kick it off
jump
right
in.
off. Let's jump right in. We're
Yes.
gonna hand it over to Pablo So
Yes.
Pablo can give us a quick
Pablo did a nice
timeline.
PDF file, people. He
Yes,
did a nice
it's
PDF file.
fantastic.
If
And we
y'all
will
ever
share it
want
with you.
Pablo on your research team, I am available to
He is
source him
that
out.
man in the team.
There will be a fee.
To pimp me
Pab-
out.
Yep.
Pablo is giving out handouts. Okay, people, there are handouts.
All right, let's go.
Let's go.
Pablo. Start it.
Take it away, Pablo.
Okay, class. Let's kind of contextualize this from more or less the beginning of this Djokovic pandemic. 1st of October last year, the Victoria government announces that all athletes need to be at least double jabbed if they want to avoid that 14-day strict quarantine when they come for the Australian Open, and they have to be double jabbed by the 30th of November. The Tennis Australia sets a deadline of 10th of December for medical exemption applications. By that time, by his own admission and his affidavit to the court, Djokovic has not applied yet for a medical exemption. That doesn't rule him out, of course, because we know what then unfolds. Now, interestingly, we come to the 14th of December, and from social media postings and everything, Novak is seen at a basketball match in Belgrade. And at this basketball match, or after this basketball match, a lot of people are reported to have contracted COVID. So if we follow the official line, it's possible he may have got it there. But another interesting point about the 14th of December that has been maybe sort of brushed over a little bit is that the Australian Technical Advisory Group on Immunisation, ATAGI, they publish an update to their document on what constitutes fully vaccinated status. And we'll come back to this, but effectively they say if you have had a recent, that is, within the last 6 months, positive PCR confirmed COVID infection, you can receive a temporary exemption due to any acute major illness, medical illness you may have suffered since you had that confirmed test. So this isn't a blanket. If you've had a recent COVID positive, you get an exemption. There are strings attached. And this is important because this is the basis that Djokovic's legal team had originally based their application to the immigration courts. Let's move forward a little bit to the really important day of the 16th of December. According to the court documents, this is when Novak tested positive through a PCR test, which he submitted himself to at 1 o'clock roughly in the afternoon. And because they expressed the analysis of it to the lab, he got it back at 8 o'clock that evening. What has not been explained, and which we will come on to later on, because we think this is a critical question, is why he had a PCR test on the 16th of December. Roll on the 17th of December, Novak's at an award ceremony for the Tennis Association of Belgrade. And there are social media posts that support that. Later that day, he's seen presenting awards to children, etc., and he's not wearing a mask, nor is anybody in the pictures that have been on social media. We come to the 18th of December. He has a photo shoot with L'Équipe, the French sports magazine newspaper. And L'Équipe report that he turned up. He did wear a mask during an interview, but not for the rest of the photo shoot. And we've seen pictures of him cavorting against a backdrop with a large trophy. Now, we move to the 22nd of December, an important date because this is when Novak says he had a negative PCR test, which was submitted in his court papers as well. We just note here that Serbian COVID regulations require a full 14-day isolation period from the time you're identified as having contracted COVID. And that would have ended on the 30th of December. So we're not even at the end of his mandatory isolation period. On the 25th, he's again, through social media, he's seen in the streets of Belgrade doing some sort of fan tennis activity. And he's also seen posing with a professional handball player from Serbia. Now, in his affidavit to the court, Novak says on the 30th of December, he states that TA had provided me with a temporary medical exemption from COVID vaccination, which was valid until the 16th of May 2022, on the grounds that I had recently recovered from COVID. And he says further in the affidavit, which is important, I have at all times understood that I am entitled to medical exemption granted to me based on my recent COVID infection. And this was consistent with Australian government entry requirements. He did not verify that he had actually met the federal border entry standards, but assumed that Tennis Australia exemption would meet that bar. The next time we see Novak on social media, he's in Sotogrande at the tennis academy there, which is near Marbella in Spain, and that's on the 31st of December. And there are several reports on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook of him training in anticipation of him competing in the Australian Open. The 4th of January, he posts his exemption permission statement on Instagram, but he also adds that he spent the holidays with family and friends, so not in quarantine. He departs Spain and he travels to Melbourne via Dubai. As he is in mid-flight, the federal government have probably worked out that there is an issue with his papers, and they ask the Victoria state government if they want to sponsor Djokovic based on the non-medical exemption permissions that are available to territories, states, and the federal government if they want to bring people into Australia who don't meet the fully vaccinated definition. The Victorian government decline and say that they're not getting involved in this. If any entity is to grant him a non-medical exemption, then it would be the federal government. So that goes nowhere. He lands on the 5th of January at 11:30 in the evening. And this is where he's quizzed by border officials and his visa is cancelled after he confirms that he's not vaccinated. And they determine that he doesn't meet the federal bar for entry to Australia as an unvaccinated individual without doing the mandatory quarantine period of 14 days. There are also other issues with his paperwork that has come to light subsequently, particularly his travel entry form, where he says he notes that he hasn't traveled in the past 14 days. But we know that's not the case because we've seen him travel from Serbia to Spain. And even if he didn't fill out that form, he's still liable for it and still responsible for it. And he actually tells in his affidavit, he states that he told them he'd filled it out correctly. We're told now, it hasn't been confirmed by the federal government, that they're investigating this as possible misinformation and perhaps grounds again to look at rescinding his visa. Anyway, on that day at 7:42, his visa's cancelled and he's informed about it. Now, this is important. We'll get into it maybe later on when we look at how the court ruled on this, but effectively what happens at 7:42 is he's presented with a form that says, we don't think you've met the standards, we are cancelling your entry visa. He had earlier, in the early hours of that morning, been offered extra time to consult with others at 8:30 in the morning when he expected people to be up and able to answer the phone and support him. This was agreed to by the border officials, and then it was withdrawn. And the basis for them withdrawing is that they said, actually, they can't help you until we cancel your visa. They can't come in here and start advising you whilst we're questioning you. Neither Tennis Australia or your lawyers. They can only act once your visa has been cancelled, if we cancel it. And this was explained in detail according to the affidavits that were given to the court. Anyway, that was the basis. The fact that he was denied this due process and his visa cancelled before 8:30 is the basis that the judge used to rule for his application in the immigration court and against the federal government or the minister. Anyway, that day he gets taken to the detention hotel that we've all become familiar with, which is housing a number of asylum seekers, some of who've been there or been in the status of asylum for 9 years or so. And he breaks his silence on the 7th of January, thanking everybody, etc. It's also that day that his requests for his own chef and to change his accommodation and have his own food, etc., and a tennis court to practice on are declined. Now, the government confirms on the 7th as well that there are 2 other people who used the same medical exemption, and they are pursuing them, I think was the terminology used. One of them was an official who read the room and did a runner, basically, managed to get out of Australia before they were deported. The other person was a double specialist on the WTA, Renata Vorachkova. Vorachkova was actually ended up being deported, and it was reported that it was unfair that because Vorachkova didn't have the financial resources to challenge her deportation, this was extremely unfair, etc., etc. That, it turns out, is not the case, and we may come on to it later on. But while she was actually detained and taken to the same hotel as Novak and questioned by the Australian Border Force, and Tennis Australia lawyers were present, according to Vorachkova. And she didn't know what was going on. She didn't understand the process. She deferred to Tennis Australia. And after she'd been told that her visa was being withdrawn and cancelled, no one advised her that she could appeal it. Nobody from Tennis Australia pointed her in the direction saying you can go to the court, etc., etc. So I think there's an issue there that needs to be cleared up. It is secondary to what we're talking about today, but she was deported. The next big event, I think, is on Monday the 10th, when the case begins in the court, and after much teething problems, we were able to follow it to a certain point. I think we can get into the details of that later, but I think, guys, this kind of gives the background to where we are in terms of events.
So I guess, and now that we have that background and we're sort of caught up, where now are we? What are we waiting for? Right now, we're all waiting for what to be known? Because Djokovic is at Tennis Australia. He's on Rod Laver practicing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What are we waiting to hear?
There are 2 things. Either he gets deported or he stays. If he's going to be deported, then the Minister for Immigration will have to decide either to deport him based on rescinding his visa again, or deport him because, in the old terminology, he's a public menace. His presence in Victoria is not constructive to good public order. Maybe because he's a health risk, maybe because he's shown signs that he might be a spreader or something or whatever, but they have that option. And it also the option that maybe because he lied on some of his documentation, that he's not a trustworthy individual, and he has the discretion to have him removed and deported effectively. And that's what he's sitting on at the moment.
I mean, it seems frankly, it all seems a little bit strange that we're still waiting for this. The judge made its decision that his visa is not rescinded. So he now has a visa to enter the country. So he's here legally, right? For all of us to understand, basically.
I'm not sure that's entirely true. He's here because he was not given due process.
Yeah, I know.
The issue of whether he's here on a legal visa, the federal government would say, no, he's not. That's why we cancelled it. He's not fully vaccinated, and he doesn't qualify for any of the medical and non-medical exemption permissions. So technically he's in some limbo, I would say.
Okay.
But it's up to them whether they pursue it or not.
Pablo, let me just first of all say thank you. Your PDF file, and the way in which you break it down was commendable. I know I would have been pissed saying it all out loud. So I appreciate, your sobering and common dulcet tones, as they would say for NPR. I appreciate it. And I'm sure the ladies and then all the Bridgerton fans appreciate it. But that's for the people, for the young people, for internet who invented 2011. The old fans will be like Pride and Prejudice, the Dickensian, but
the Colin Firth era. Go ahead.
Yeah, but oh, God, I just want to say, this is all, I think Andreen hits on a point here. It's like, what are they waiting for? You Pablo, you pointed out that there is this quote unquote limbo, right? That, his visa, though he got off on a quote unquote technicality, was avoided due process. But you pointed to something rather interesting, that he was afforded due process. The lawyers could not come into the room until the visa was canceled. There is no point in waiting this extra at 7:40 instead of 8:30, because they would have just been sitting in a room waiting. Novak had made it clear that he needed his attorneys to come in. And during a immigration interview, lawyers are not in the room. When you're at the airport, if I were to go to Australia and I don't have a visa, I don't get to call my lawyer. This is not TV. This is not Law and Order. I go into that room by myself, and I cannot get legal. If I'm misunderstanding, you can correct me at any point. They really can't come in until a direct action had been taken, right? Which was
Yes, this is absolutely right, and it's not been something that has been picked up and reported on too widely, I think. Effectively, when you're detained by the border force, you haven't been permitted to enter the country. So you're not afforded the full rights of somebody who's able to, free movement, etc., within their territory. They are determining whether they will let you in. And it's only after they would cancel your visa that you can then start a legal process to challenge that. You can't have people sitting in the room advising you whilst they're asking you questions. And I think if you've ever been detained by border forces in any country or whatever, or questioned, they don't afford you the opportunity to invite people in to help you along. And they explained to Novak, they said, look, the sooner we make a decision, the better for you, because that means you can talk to your lawyer sooner. If we don't cancel your visa, then you're out of here and you go to your hotel. If we do cancel your visa, then you can get straight on the phone to them and start the process, because you said you won't accept it, and okay, you'll go through the courts and what have you. But they can't advise you until we make a decision. And I think, yes.
So ultimately what's happening, if I'm understanding it correctly, the judge who decided to not rescind the visa did so because they said because he asked for that extra little bit of time for people to wake up and be available to him. And they said yes. And then they said no. Basically, there's no point in doing that. Let's move forward to make it legal for you to even be able to do that.
The judge leaves that secondary part of your statement off, though.
Right. Yeah. But that's what happened. So
that is exactly what happened.
So he got off on a technicality that really wasn't.
He got off on most of administrative law, which this falls under, is process. And have you followed the correct process? They didn't. The issue of whether his visa is valid is absolutely irrelevant, because the judge rules you didn't treat him fairly. He wasn't afforded due process. Therefore, it was wrong to cancel his visa.
I have a question right there.
Okay. Oh, so let me just, go ahead.
If he wasn't afforded due process, which is what the judge is saying, and that's why the judge ultimately decided to not cancel the visa, right? So how would it have been different if he would have been afforded that due process? if the process wasn't able to start until it was initially canceled? How does that
Well,
work?
I think the technicality part is the 30 minutes, right? They wanted to give him the time that he was promised. That's the process piece. I think we're complicating it by saying that no one could have actually helped him. But what the judge came down on was that you just needed to give him that extra time, which you had promised him, right?
Okay,
That's
But
what
but
they
the,
said.
but
that
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 extra time was to consult his attorneys.
But
Which
it
he
doesn't
wasn't
matter if
allowed to
he.
do
That's
if
fine.
it
That's
wasn't
fine.
already canceled.
But that's
okay.
fine,
I
right?
I think
But
we're all, yes, we're all hitting on the same point, which is, and I'll come to this because it's important, because people were, I think, misreporting the judge's leaning at the early part of the hearing. Uh, Practically speaking, he, even if they had waited until 8:30, allowed him to call Tennis Australia and his lawyers, given them another hour or two to knock it backwards and forwards there, and then still cancelled his visa, he would have had a very difficult pathway to challenge that, because they would have allowed him the time that they gave him, and
yeah,
they would still have made their decision. If they literally had have waited another 48 minutes or whatever it was, let him make the calls, and then made the same decision, they would have been in their full rights. It's because
in the
they
clear.
offered him the
Yeah.
time and then they took it away. Now, it's true, in that the extra time they offered him, he couldn't have done anything else, because all the paperwork that he had submitted. There wasn't, for example, there weren't a separate set of lab tests
Yeah.
confirming his PCR. There wasn't a second PCR within, 12 hours or 24 hours to affirm the first PCR test. He didn't. He literally handed them over most of the papers he'd had from Tennis Australia, so they couldn't supplement his basis for having a medical exemption. Nobody could add any more. Now, the judge said early on in the hearing, what more could he have done? And people interpret that as the judge saying they were really unkind on him and pushing him. But that is absolutely, and the judge was actually doing this, I think, as judges do, to tease out a response from his counsel to see whether they would give ground. And they didn't. They know what the judge was playing at, because by the judge saying, what more could he do? The judge is accepting there was no more he could do. So this extra
Mm.
48 minutes he was granted, it wouldn't have made any difference. But it was misinterpreted. I saw a lot on Twitter that people were saying, no, he's leaning towards Djokovic, blah, blah, blah. And the reason this is important is because the judge's order is the direct opposite of that comment. Because the judge's order is he should have been given the extra time. It may have made a difference. So
I,
I make this point because we need to be careful in case he appears in court again later on. There is a
I
little
just want
point.
to
Yeah.
go ahead, sorry.
Can I just say something on the
Yes,
court case? Because
go ahead.
when the hearing was announced for the 10th, the immigration minister asked for the hearing to be postponed for another 2 days to allow attorneys for the minister to prepare their case, because they hadn't seen or didn't know, they didn't have a run at it before really the 8th or the 9th of January. And this request was declined by the court because the court wanted to deal with it expeditiously. Now, Christopher Tran, who represents the government, was supposed to make his submission on behalf of the respondent, the minister, in the afternoon. They broke for lunch. They had a longer lunch than was expected. When they came back, there was literally a session for about 60 seconds. And this session looked like a typical session where the judge says, do you need some extra time? And Christopher Tran responded, yes, Your Honor, I do need some extra time. And when I saw that, and then the hearing was adjourned, when I saw that, I knew that there had been discussions during the lunch, and the judge had effectively said, I'm going to rule on behalf of Djokovic. So do you want to go through this in the afternoon, or what's going to happen? And the government conceded at that point, and they came back to the court about 10-20 minutes later, and the judge read out an order that he had drafted up in agreement, and the government did not contest that order. And Tran says at the end of the session, of course, I'm going to, as a matter of courtesy, I'm going to tell you that another minister is considering cancelling his visa. And the judge said, well, if they do that, they need to come back to this court very quickly, etc., etc. So I understood from that when Tran had communicated back to the immigration minister or the government effectively that the judge was leaning towards ruling for Djokovic, they had begun the process then of seeing how they could remove him through an alternative means. And that's why the government put up no resistance in the afternoon in the court case, because they had set in motion processes to remove him through another means, or possibly the same means.
You know what? I think, and that's lovely. That's a lovely thought. I don't actually think Djokovic is going to experience
I agree with you,
consequences for
Andrew.
this at all.
I agree with you.
I think that everyone understands that something dubious happened, but their willingness to take a deep dive and maybe take more time, I just don't think there's going to be any bandwidth for it. I really don't. I think everybody wants to wash their hand clean of this and just move on. But if that's the case, we still are waiting. We don't know. We can make all sorts of conjectures, but we can't. But what we can talk about, though, are the elements of what you've outlined, Pablo, that strikes us as a little bit sketchy. So let's take a deep dive into that. What struck you as the sketchiest moments in this timeline?
Okay.
Wait, let's start with Janina.
Hold on. I just want to add something that I find it sort of interesting with the alleged 40-something minutes, whatever that is, which is the mere technicality, that had their way, Novaxx still cannot do anything because part of the rules of being in the interview process, your devices are taken away, because the judge had to instruct them, even when Nolo was in the hotel, even after he was afforded to contact his lawyers and whatever, he still didn't have his phone.
Yep.
So I don't know what was he gonna do and send up a bat signal. And the other crazy thing is that Tennis Australia knew exactly where Nole was. There was no confusion where he was and what was happening. So because everyone on Twitter knew what was going on. So
I think that's a little bit of the process that Pablo has identified, which is that maybe while it may not have realistically changed the outcome, the perception that you gave him, the time, is part of the fairness narrative, right?
Exactly. It's due process. Absolutely.
Regardless of what you're going to do. I don't have access to a lawyer, but I'm giving you the time to twiddle your thumbs, even if you don't, you know what I mean? I think it felt a little bit overreach. And I think
I agree. And just to get it precisely, it is the fact they offered him the extra time and then they took it away.
They took it back. Yeah. It's a little bit, it just makes your case that much harder. Because I think ultimately you're right. Maybe there were things that could have been asked about Djokovic, but you've done muddy the water. But we can muddy the water as fans because we're not lawyers. So let's get into
let's go. Okay, Janina, you want to say something?
Yes.
Well, I can preface it all by saying it sounds like bullshit. I mean, it is what it is. Listen, you don't get to say, if you're going to try to pull a fast one, pull it properly. Don't wait until you're going to try to pull a fast one that your timeline doesn't even match up, because it doesn't work here. It doesn't work here at all. And if protocol were followed, he'd be on his way home. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And it's almost like he's being so arrogant as to say, this is who I am and I deserve to be here no matter what. And he's in court sharing all of this stuff that just doesn't add up. You don't get to say, I've been at home, and everybody knows you're not at home. You haven't even applied for the exemption in time. You haven't even finished your quarantine in time to do anything else, but yet you're out here gallivanting all around the freaking world. Like, I understand from a pure, I'm a Novak fan perspective. You want your dude there. You want to see him play. I'm sure that Tennis Australia wants him there. However, this shit just does not add up. You can't make it add up. There's no even tweaking things a little bit to make it add up. It just doesn't work. So from where I sit, if they let him stay and play, which I believe they will, tennis, not even just Tennis Australia as a whole, they look like dipshits because they didn't follow their own protocols. And there's no way around saying that they did. No matter what they say, it just doesn't work. It doesn't. The timeline doesn't add up.
I completely agree. I think if we can dive into that timeline, one aspect of it, but I just want to say one thing about the court case that's also, I think, interesting. When the judge made it clear when they came back after the lunch that he was going to issue an order and they were going to need to agree it, and Djokovic's lawyers asked for some extra time, and the judge said, "No way. I've entertained you enough. I'm going to read out my order now, and you're going to agree with it." And Djokovic's lawyers said, "Okay, they didn't want the judge to rule the way he ruled, and I'll explain why. They knew during the lunch that the government was going to try another means in which to remove him. What Djokovic's lawyers wanted to achieve was, one, you didn't follow due process, so he was abused, and that's one ground for giving him back his visa. The ground they really wanted to try and succeed on was that he had a valid medical exemption. Because if he had a valid medical exemption and they could stand that up in court and the judge would agree with them, it would be very difficult. It'd be next to impossible to remove him for any other basis. And they weren't happy.
Isn't it almost like the judge just pussied out, though?
Yeah.
The judge just totally pussied out.
Yeah.
The judge knew damn well he didn't have a proper medical exemption, but instead of being the quote unquote bad guy, he says, you should have given him that extra time. So I'm going to get rid of this on that technicality.
I'm going to
leave this, because
I'm going to leave the judge. I feel like is saying, I'm going to leave it on the shoulders of the government or whoever it is, whoever's hands it is in right now to say, you got to go. I'm gonna put it on their shoulders to be the bad guy. I feel like that's what happened.
Because the judge did question when Tran said, like, we are probably the minister deserve the right to put you out. The judge did ask if they're still gonna even go forward with this action. And I mean, I know, Pablo, I know you think the judge is being impartial on this, whatever, but he reeks of bias and whatever, you know what I mean? And that's fine, right? But what I want to say, as Janina points out, Australia looks like dipshit. My issue is that you're looking like dipshit for the biggest anti-vaxxer in all of sports. Well, probably second to Aaron Rodgers.
Absolutely.
Like, you people have put it all on the line for this dude. I mean, I just want to, because, whatever, the people can say whatever. We hate Nole. Go right ahead. I don't give two shits. But facts are facts, right? This is more than a pattern of behavior with Nole. What I find is the Trumpian, squaring away and trying to pretend like what we're seeing here. This is who Nole is. This boy is. I think he came in knowing full well that he didn't even have proper documentation, but he didn't need that, because Nole played all of the right arrogant string, because it seems as though Nole has been allowed passes all over the world to go through anyway without showing any real reason why he should even be coming into any country. And we noted this when the pandemic started, that tennis players are moving all over the world freely, and no one seems to be questioning them and whatever. And Nole said even before vaccine was a thing, I'm not taking any kind of vaccine. I'm not doing it.
We have to, to add to what you're saying, Reels. This is Australia. One of the places that has had the most rigorous rules throughout the pandemic.
Well, clearly not.
But they have. No, they have. But in this instance, no. But they have had the most rigorous rules regarding who can move where with their own citizens from the beginning. And now, like you're saying, you're going to throw it out for this guy?
But here's the thing.
If this were Mexico, who says, come whenever you want, you don't need a test, you don't need shit, you don't need to be vaccinated.
But no, we
wouldn't be a surprise. Well, I am.
I am questioning this whole shit with Australia being this tough on COVID and whatever, because you didn't even bat an eye. This boy just, okay, the mere discomfort of being in this quote unquote hotel. No, they literally put on an international, made an international incident of the situation, right? He dared the Australian government to not only try to cancel my visa, because here's the thing, they canceled the visa and all of this whole due process and all of this time and exemption. 9 out of 10 times, actually 10 out of 10 times, they're already in a freaking plane before their lawyer file any paperwork, right? And it wasn't. And here's the thing: no one was confused. One, everyone know who Novak was. Everybody know Novak is an anti-vaxxer, and all of this ambiguity as to how he can come in and how he can medical exemption is just really, really insane to me. Because if Australia is this tough and all this shit, all of this shit should have been very clear. What I find is really crazy is that he's consulting Tennis Australia, who is a tennis organization, the Victorian government, which is a local constabulary, and we're not. It seems as though people are getting the information from the federal government, who is in charge of the border, last, which I think is really absurd. That
okay, can I just say something?
Say it, Pablo.
Okay, that the judge found grounds to undo the visa cancellation, I think we should applaud, because it's rare that the government loses an immigration court, and I think anything that stands up for the rights of whoever is a good thing. That it is possible to challenge authority and to win.
But this isn't the case.
Yes. Okay.
You know,
so that's performative. Okay.
Yeah.
Where and of course, Tennis Australia turned their back on Varachova as soon as they kicked her out. They could have said to her, "No, look, you can appeal, and we'll help you appeal." But they didn't. They ran a mile. They dumped her, and she was deported.
Refused to stay in the hotel, and she just said exactly. Tennis Australia took Nole from the hotel straight to Rod Laver Arena.
Yeah. Okay.
They took him straight there for photo op. So
I think one of the things that is concerning many people, and all of us I know, is the veracity of these PCR tests that were submitted, and their rather convenient timing and everything. Now, if we go to specific points in the timeline, and just ask one or two questions and see where that takes us. And the one I would, sorry, Andreen, you were going to say something before I go on to that.
No. I think one of the things that's one of the reasons why I asked you to do the timeline up front is because I think what's happening here belies anything that we can establish in the timeline, because it has nothing to do with the timeline. Mm-hmm. It has everything to do with sort of the performance that Nole was supposed to put him front of everyone to generate a sense of fairness about why he was here. That's what I think is really interesting to me. It's like, yes, the PCR test, what date, all of those things. When we dig into it, we're going to find out that it was probably flawed. The results were probably very strange, because first and foremost, he didn't follow any of the rules. He didn't follow any of the rules for taking a test and waiting it out and getting a positive result and waiting it out. None of those
from
things
his own
done.
country. From his own country.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you know,
and
so
yet again, and the crazy. Sorry, go ahead.
But let me just say. So for me, I think what's disappointing about this is it's so strange, because it's kind of like when someone says follow the science, and you realize that people are not actually following the science. They're following all these other optics and all these other elements that belies exactly what you forced other people to do, right? Which is, what did Tennis Australia clearly was a little bit in the bag for Nole. They definitely wanted to facilitate a process for him to get into the country, right? They fed him as much information as they possibly could. And even with that assisting hand, Nole still disregarded and cared nothing about the risk that they took for him. Do you know what I mean? That's the thing that's funny.
In front of them. In front of them.
Okay. And Andreen, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said follow the science. And let's just do that for a moment and see where it takes us. Okay, go to the 16th of, let's go to the 14th of December. The document that ATAGI released was not a new document on the 14th of December. It was an update. And you have to be on top of Victoria or the federal COVID regulations in Australia to notice that that document was changed, was edited or updated. And the only thing that really changed in the document was they made a distinction between a prior COVID test, which is more than 6 months old, a prior COVID positive result, which is more than 6 months old, and a more recent one in the last 6 months. And a more recent one in the last 6 months may generate a medical exemption from you if you'd suffered a major acute medical illness. That's their wording. That is exactly what Novak latched onto. It is what he said in his affidavit to the court. It is what Tennis Australia used, but it was all a misreading of that document. He didn't have a major medical illness following his infection of COVID. Okay, can I just finish this point? Because let us now come to the 16th of December, when he apparently has a PCR test and it proves positive. My question here is, why did he have a PCR test done?
Right.
Because
Was he
supposedly-
symptomatic, or
But
did he know that
supposedly-
he came in contact with someone
The
positive?
test result didn't generate any change in his behavior. You know,
right.
a normal
Okay, hang on.
person,
Yeah.
normal person says, I'm showing symptoms. I think I've been in contact with somebody. I'm going to go take a test. And then you perform what you're supposed to perform when you take a test, right? You isolate, you wait until you get your result, and all those things are happening.
Precisely.
You get your result. Yeah.
Yeah, you only take a PCR test when you are symptomatic.
No. I mean,
no. Most
but I would say-
countries
but
insist you take a rapid antigen, a rapid antigen, or a lateral flow test first. If you are asymptomatic,
But this
you
is
take
knowledge.
you take. And let's look at the science. If you're asymptomatic, you take a rat, or you take a lateral antigen flow test. If that then says that you are actually positive, you may go on to take a PCR test.
I have to disagree with that, Pablo, because
hang on. If you are symptomatic, it's no point taking the rapid antigen test because it's useless to you. You need to take a PCR test. And my point is, if he took a PCR test, it was because he was symptomatic, and if he was symptomatic, he knew he probably had COVID. If this is a genuine test.
I think
So
you agree.
I don't think that's how it works. That's not how it works here.
Yeah.
I want to be fair. That's not how it works here. Honestly, if you have been in contact with someone here, in the patients that I'm involved with, if you have been in contact with someone who is positive, whether you be symptomatic or asymptomatic, we're going to recommend that you take a PCR test because it is the most sensitive and accurate test. You are far more likely to get a false negative from a rapid test than you are a PCR test. So here, I mean, I can't speak for what the rest of the world is doing, but we in my office would give a PCR test in that situation. I don't think it's so much strange that he took the PCR test, whether it be because he was symptomatic or he was in contact or just getting ready to travel. I think all of those things are acceptable. What screams crazy to me is that several days later, he took another one,
next day
got a negative test because
but the next day he went out to see in tough,
But we know that when you have tested positive for COVID, I have patients call me all the time saying, my employer won't let me go back to work without a negative test. And everybody says that's insane, because the truth is you can test positive for 90 days with zero symptoms after you've been sick as all hell. You can still test positive. Now, just because you're testing positive doesn't mean you're out spreading it across the world, 50 days later, 60 days later. So to me, in what I see every single day and do at my job, it is insane to me that he would test negative that soon after having a positive test with a PCR test. Now, if he came out and said, I took a PCR test and I was positive, and then I took a rapid test and I was negative, okay, great. Why? Because rapid tests are not as sensitive to the virus, which is exactly why we see a lot of sick people test too early with a rapid test and get a negative result.
Well, this is the thing. And so the suspicion is that Djokovic took a test to get the negative result.
Well, he didn't take a test. They generated a test.
Or generated a false positive, therefore giving him the license to tell Tennis Australia that, hello, I was just positive. I don't have to take a vaccine for until May. And then immediately knowing that he did not have COVID, went back and generated another test a few days later. The question is, which one is real, right? The question is, was the first one real?
I don't even think any of them need to be real.
Because I would be willing to bet my house it's not the negative PCR test after a real positive result.
No. I think if everyone is
given. I think people are, I think the reporters who were caught on a hot mic has the true measure of Nole better than I think anyone is in the public is willing to discuss Nole.
I think anyone willing to discuss on camera. They clearly listen. Nothing.
But I mean, in general on Twitter, right? in just to an extent.
Yeah.
This is Nole's modus operandi, and you can go as far back as you want. Nole is someone who is going to burn your house down and watch it burn. He's going to literally come and watch your house burn and don't care everything. And I mean, like, you can go as far back as 2008. 2008 Australian Open final when he was losing to Sanga in the first set and some. He complained about Sanga's family and said Sanga's family is harassing his family. Now, we got so much receipt of how bullshit that is. We have more than we had a whole newspaper article yesterday or today, depending on where you are. And this is everything he's ever touched. This is twice, right? If we are to take Nole at his word, right, that these tests are real, right? Do they defy the science, as we say, if we're following the science? Nole has twice exposed his own countrymen that they swear to God he's the next Jesus to this deadly disease and don't give two fucks about it. All we hear about the Adria tour where he's going all around the Balkan region is about how Chilich got it, Chilich wife, his wife, but no one has ever calculated the cost or the result of the people they interacted with. What Nole father did was blame Gregor. It's Gregor who brought it here. But even if Gregor brought it here, let's put that in the bag and say, okay, all right, we give you. Gregor fucked up, right? You people took it to the nightclub. That wasn't Gregor. Yeah, that was a planned event. And there again, the government has allowed me. All those people they hung around with, all the parents, the grandmothers, they took pictures, the children, they took it back to their parents. No one said what was, and we know around that time, the spike of COVID went up in Serbia. I'm not saying the Adria tour did this, but I'm saying the Adria tour contributed to that. Everyone, as a result, the journalists said, oh, no, it was human. He was trying a new thing. The government was the one who was forcing him. He was under pressure. But you know this here. This is not the government. This is Nole. Nole literally let his government almost start an international incident. In fact, they're threatening to start an international incident. His people were in the street causing riot, in the street, and no one is holding Nole accountable. Again, he started the PPPI, whatever that shit is. Before he started it, he blamed Roger and Rafa and said, they don't call, they don't want to do anything, whatever. And Rafa said, boo, I got my phone right here. I don't see no text message. You never called me. You're saying that we don't call you. You don't, as far our understanding was different. He has nothing to say. Again, he watched it burn. And when he got kicked out of the US Open after starting the photo op, did he give a shit about these people? This is who Nole is every single time. Nole, his family don't apologize for anything. And this is what I'm talking about. So this difference that Nole don't understand the process and whatever, my guess, allegedly, let me just say for legal reason, Nole didn't give a fuck about what the Australian Open was doing. He came here with one thing in mind. He wants to win a 10th Australian Open title.
Sure,
know,
that's
basically what he did was just show up at the border and be like, "I dare you people to send me back home."
no. I don't think it's as bold as that. Yeah, he's a flamethrower
But
and
the
always has been.
paperwork is
And
shitty, Pablo.
but hang on. No, let's go back to what Andreen asked, which is take this period from the 14th of December to the 30th of December.
He was tramping all over the damn world.
Precisely.
And no
He
one was
wasn't.
confused about this.
He took if we accept what he says, he took a PCR test on the 16th. He got his result on the 16th. He then went spreading it around wherever he went on the 17th, the 18th, the 22nd, the 25th, the 30th, whatever. His brother said in the press conference when asked yesterday, did he get his result on this? Did he know that he had tested positive on the 16th? His brother said yes, and all the papers are legal. Firstly, why would you add that comment? All the papers are legal. It's bizarre to say that because no one asked you whether they were legal or they were fake. But he said, remember, and he said yes, and all the papers are in the public and they're all legal. So he, as Andreen pointed out, he didn't observe quarantine as was required in Serbia, but he did get results after the 14th of December when that wording changed on the ATAGI document. And he slotted himself in there. And all of these coincidences where he suddenly gets COVID on the 16th, recovers on the 22nd, is able then to submit documents after the closing date to get a medical exemption. It stinks to high heaven. It really does.
But here's the thing, he gets away with it. Nothing is going to happen.
So that's the thing.
And can I add one thing on?
I mean, let me tell you
add
something.
one
Let
thing
me
on
tell
top
you
of
how
that?
sloppy your shit is. When Twitter detected,
Let him finish the point and then come back to what.
Can I just add one point on top of this, which really, really pisses me off? And this goes to the heart of who he is as an individual, and people like him. He has been a proud anti-vaxxer since the pandemic started. He has stood on his principle that he will not be forced to have a vaccination, and he stood by that. Because that principle interferes with his financial and egotistical objectives, he goes round the back of everybody to see how he can game the system.
But they let him game it. Like
they let him game the system.
We're letting, you know what, the funny thing is, I know there's a part, and Reels you can say it, but I know there's a part of people that are really, I'm not upset with Nole, because you know what? Nole has declared himself from the beginning. If you allow Nole to declare that he does not believe in vaccines, does not believe even in COVID really, and then you allow him to circumvent your own systems, then that's on you. That's on you, because you have decided.
Shame on you.
Yeah, it's shame on you. Like, what does they say? Hate the game, not the player. The reverse of that is what's happening here. Is like, you have to hold yourself accountable. Tennis Australia wanted Nole there. Yep. They gave him as much information as possible so that he could create a path. They didn't tell him exactly what to do, but they lined the path for him.
They highlighted the passages, the relevant passages.
Here are the passages. Here's what you're going to need to do. Do you? That's what they said to him. Do you? And then what did he do? He did himself. And guess what? He's going to continue to do it. The only time, and he's rarely suffered consequences. And I think what's enraging to everyone is that we know so many people who bypass the rules and get away with it. And what's ironic to me, though, I'll be honest, this is why I chuckle, is that this has been the accusation about the top echelon of tennis for years. Yep. All the people who hated Fidal and accused Fidal of manipulating, all of those people are suddenly demanding that system perform that way for Nole. So what is cracking me up is the ultimate irony here, which is that you all chose him as your avatar because he was above all that. And now you are turning around and asking for that same system to reward him because, quote unquote, he deserves it. I do not believe that I need to watch Novaxx Djoker win another slam and suffer the consequences of a potential COVID positive test just to watch a man hit a ball. I love it. I love feminist. I think it's great, but
It's not
clearly,
worth it.
everyone has lost their perspective. Everyone has lost their perspective. There are people out on the streets for this man, and I was like, without masks either. What? Anyway, so I mean, I looked at that and I was like, "You're
Right.
protesting."
I mean, this is the part I don't understand.
It's
This isn't.
It's the
This is
Nole
the part that really frustrates
insurrection.
me.
so
But here's
weird
the
to
thing:
me.
it's just like what I find
yeah.
so crazy. After all of the shit, Australia has put its own people. There are people who were stuck in London, Australians who couldn't get into their own country, who have been bankrupt because they're trying to stay in hotels. They can't work in England. England won't extend any
couldn't
sort
see
of perks.
but they couldn't even go
Couldn't see dying
to see
family.
dying
I mean, this is what
family.
we're talking about.
Okay, but
We're not
this
talking
is
we
why.
about
we
denying
have
Nole.
we have to challenge the system, though. This is not Nole. If people have to demand, and I think ultimately that's what happened to Nole. I honestly think that if Nole had not posted on social and did a little dance and a little jig, I think he would have come in and there would have been some questions like, "Oh, why is Nole here? I know he's not got the vaccine." And we could have gone with the will they, won't they, right? Because that's all meant to be anonymous. That's all meant to be hidden. No one's supposed to ask you about that. But I think it's the jaunt, right? And I think the people are the ones that pressed the country and challenged Nole's entry into the country. I think it's people that did that. I really did. I don't think any of the top officials really thought very much about it. I think they were willing to create a path for his entry into the country quietly. But I think he did a dance.
I completely agree with that, and I want to put this
Mhm.
out. I know we're not conspiracy theorists here, but
What's your
I
conspiracy, Pablo?
okay. Let me give you a hypothetical situation where he arranges these COVID PCR tests to give him the results that he needs, and he assumes that because it's medical information, it will be kept private. Nobody will know why he got an exemption, and that's why he didn't say a medical exemption on his Instagram post on the 4th.
I agree. I agree 100%.
And he thought, because he's brazen and bold and highly egotistical and hubristic, that he would waltz through immigration with this paperwork, and he would not have to answer questions. He would be able to decline answering questions about how he got his exemption permission, and he wouldn't have to answer questions about why he was cavorting around Belgrade on the 16th, 17th, 18th, 22nd, 25th,
And
whatever.
who knows when the cameras
Because
won't there.
exactly, because nobody would know it was a medical exemption, and I think he intentionally left that word out. And even the language of an exemption permission is lifted from the regulations. That is not typical English, especially if English is not your first language. You just say, "I got an exemption." You wouldn't say, "I got an exemption permission." That's legalese. And I think he thought no one is going to find out how I got this exemption because it's medical business and it's private. I'll do what the fuck I like, basically.
I don't know where he got that. I mean, like, I knew he think he was going to get away with it, which he did. But I don't know where he think no one was going to stop and ask him, because he's Novaxx Djokovic, idiot. You have been anti-vax before there was even a vaccine.
But I agree. I think
So
he thought that he had. I think he probably did think that he had something in his back pocket that was going to protect him because it was supposedly medical. I think that is a very good possibility.
Well, okay, we are almost at time.
Okay, can I have two questions?
There's been a lot of rage. What are your two questions, Pablo?
Okay. Do you think he's going to be deported?
No.
That's the first one.
No.
Vote.
Reals?
Everyone vote.
No,
I think he will. I think he'll be deported.
Wow, wonderful. And then let me
tell you something.
Ask your second question and then come back around.
Okay. On a lighter note, is Novak an honorary black man?
Why?
Hell
no. Yeah,
because he's Muhammad Ali, he's Martin Luther King, he's Kunta Kinte, he's
who said this?
Look, you see, we only here for hours. I wouldn't even dignify that with an answer, Pablo. Okay, look, please.
No,
please.
I make
I'm
it.
Trying
it was
to be
a joke, but I make
no.
I'm trying to make a serious point here. You see all the people who are coming out and calling him Muhammad Ali or Martin Luther King.
it's his
And
rabid
you
I've
fans.
not
ever
They say a
seen
lot
and
of
you
shit too.
I
Nobody
don't
black
want
did
to
that.
see this.
Nobody black
Yeah,
did
nobody
that.
black did
Nobody
that.
black did that. Because first and foremost, this is the thing. You know what would have made him Muhammad Ali? If when he got to the detention hotel, he struck up conversations with everyone. And upon his first attempt at being questioned in the media, he completely reframes it and says, you know what? I've only been here 20 minutes. That's a blink compared to the people who've been here for 8, 9,
9
10
years.
years,
Exactly.
whatever.
He would
Amen.
have stayed there.
And
He would have
then
stayed in the hotel.
you yes, and then you would have taken a statement, and then you would have taken your moment and shone a light on them, and then you would have challenged the government to release those people or to bring them in front of a judge, as he was quickly able to have to. That is a Muhammad
And
Ali
give them
move.
the
A
due
move for
process
your
that
yeah, and
because
you know what?
okay.
And
I think a
Muhammad Ali is about taking consequences. What
I
if
think
he lost
mm,
things? You have to lose
uh,
things, and
that's why I
nobody
don't.
wants that,
That's
right?
why I don't think it's a. That's why I don't think it's a Muhammad Ali moment, because Muhammad Ali would have stayed away and stuck
But
to his
also,
principles, like
but
he stayed away
also,
from
it's not
Vietnam.
about you. It's not about you. This is the
Sure,
point about any of this. This is what I'm thinking about, even with PP, the PT, whatever the hell it is.
PA.
Every
Yeah.
single one of those people are in it to advance their own things, right? Sam was about escaping Russia and bypassing Russian rules about the vaccine. That's what he went on a run. John isn't. All of these young men are not about advancing a greater good. It is
hmm
about creating a situation for their own ease, their own flexibility. He's anti, like,
yes,
oh,
exactly. You're
that's not
damaging
how
my
that works.
commerce.
But
Yeah. You're
this is what I mean.
it's
Like,
not even
where
their
is the
commerce,
greater
it's just
good
their
here?
ego.
But where's the greater good? So this is why I don't think this move. I mean, what I thought Novak had a really good moment. Listen, I was thinking about it from a PR perspective. I was like, you got trapped up in here, things didn't work out. You go in there and you extend that humanity that you say you have.
You don't
You
ask for a
listen to
personal
what
fucking chef.
you
You
know
know
what
what
I
I'm
mean?
saying?
Like, I mean, that's the thing too. Like, can I have a chef? Can I have like some fresh?
You didn't even
I
ask for
need
You
special
say,
food.
flexibility.
You
you
wanted
say,
a
what
whole
about all these?
chef to show up
You
there.
say,
You
what about
wanted
all
a
these
whole
other people who have been here for 9 years?
Let
What
them
about the
food.
people who
Let
don't
them
have the
have.
resources?
You know
That would have been
what
a
I
shining
mean?
moment for Novak,
or
but he
even
Oh
fucked
get
all
your
that
lawyers
shit up.
to
my
or get your lawyers to not only talk to them, but at the very bare minimum, request what they wanted to eat tonight. I am paying for everybody to eat a
But
proper meal.
nothing. That's the performance of greatness that you want to do. The greatness comes from you sublimating yourself and putting other people ahead of you. So you know what? If you sacrifice your chase to 21, that is greatness. Because you looked around and said, you know what, this is more than about me getting another trophy.
Yep.
Like those are the kinds of things I want to be hearing. This is not about any of that. Like, and so let's just forget that sort of narrative of like on a pedestal, oh Jesus, that none of those things are happening. I do think though that the country wants this to go away. And I think that I mean, they can't avoid it now, right? What are you going to do? If you let him stay, they're going to talk about it. If you let him leave,
They're
they're going
going
to
to
talk
talk
about it.
about it.
So I think they're kind of stuck between
We're
a
going to
rock
hear
and a
about
hard
this for the
place.
rest of the year,
Oh my
whether we
God.
like it or
I-
not.
Can I tell you? This is the part. Can I just whisper, y'all? This is the Trumpian part of this for me. Is
Mm.
that you remember how during his era, you just every day you woke up and you're like, what is the news today? And it wasn't about whatever was going on. It wasn't about the tennis and stuff. This is
On
what
the
Norway has
pandemic,
done
we
to
are
the
literally
tennis,
talking
the
about the
tennis right now.
pandemic, something
It's like,
serious.
like I can't deal with this. It's like the air in the room is being sucked up by this one guy's desire to not get the jab, which is entirely his right to do, but then deal with the consequences of choosing
Yep.
not to get the jab. That's what it means to stand in your principle. Is you say I do not want this, but then you don't try to circumvent. Like you say I don't want this and you suffer the consequences. I mean, hello, that's what Colin Kaepernick had to do. Nobody says that's what he should have had to do, but that's what it means. When you stand in your principle, then the world has to shape around you, but you don't go around and go, well, I'm standing in my principle, but let me slide through this back door. I mean, that's just not how it works.
Right. It doesn't work that way. It does not work
So
that way.
he's
And everyone is
exhausting.
oppressing, everyone is oppressing me. Meanwhile,
just
all
ain't
of your colleagues
tiring.
are standing there looking at you like, sir, we're doing the bare minimum.
I
And
know,
again,
the
but you see,
bare
this is
minimum. I can't take it.
right,
Too
but
much.
this is the part that I find that like this is why he can't sell any of this is who he is. Because every
Hmm.
moment when you think Nole has the easy layup, he chooses himself and just be arrogant and this whole family affair. That man has literally admitted on camera to putting his people at risk of COVID twice. And he don't even believe in the vaccine. He believes in his own power. That's just how arrogant he is. He thinks COVID can't kill him or do him anything.
Listen,
Right?
he
It's his
also
okay.
believes that he can hit a tennis ball through
But
telekinesis.
he
So that's what we're dealing with, okay?
but he's
I love it,
but this is
though.
the thing. He
Best
believes
fan
in his
number
own
one.
ability to avoid to heal from COVID, that he doesn't care if he gives it to others and they can't. Because
Maybe
he
we should
believes
just give
himself to
him
be
a piece of
special, right?
bread.
But
Final
this is the
words,
crazy
y'all.
part, right? He
Let's
thinks he's
let
special.
me
No one
hear it.
else is like him.
Okay.
Yeah,
This is how I
final
think this boy is
thoughts.
a
Final words.
psychopath.
Final thoughts. Final thoughts.
I'll
We
tell
all
you my
believe. Go for it, Janina.
I'll tell you
Sorry,
my
Jan.
final thought.
Pablo,
Tell
you
me.
go first. Sorry.
All right.
We started
I,
with Janina, but
That's
thanks,
fine.
Bill.
I
No,
no.
I'm
Well,
just kidding.
let's
Go
okay.
ahead,
Let's go.
Pablo.
No, please. Let's go with Janina. I want to hear her speak.
Okay. I mean, I don't have a
Preach.
lot.
Preach.
I can't even preach on it because it's bullshit. And I think that Novak has shown us who he is, a selfish motherfucking bastard. I think he will absolutely get away with this. He will play the Australian Open. Motherfucker will probably win. And because he pulled this shit, we're going to have to hear about it for the rest of the fucking year. And God only knows how long. And I mean, the Australian Open hasn't even started yet. And I'm over it. I'm over it. I really hope they send him home, but I don't think it's happening.
Pablo.
I go back to what I said just a moment ago. It's the fact that you can have principles and stand by them, and I think that's utterly admirable, even if I disagree with them. When you seek to game the system because your principles are just damn inconvenient for you, it makes me sick to my stomach, and this is what I think he has done here. I see tonight that the German digital sleuths have started to look at the timestamps, the digital timestamps on the documents that he submitted, and they're starting to raise questions about when they were actually created. I would never like to see him be brought down by fakery and fraud, but if that's what it is, then so be it.
Look, no one did this but Nole, right? I didn't do this for Nole.
Mm-hmm.
Nole did this for himself. So if he comes down by his own actions, I am agreed. I am all right. We have to, we don't live in consequences free world. Actions have consequences and repercussions. I'm gonna let Andrine have the last word, but I just want to say, we only have an hour and some, but I just want to point out that that this shit, that Nole has done here, the tone. It's like once you have allowed this thing to come into the room, you can't get rid of it, right? This is the first major, and this is our new normal in the sense that we are clearly not, because of motherfucker like Nole, we can't get rid of COVID, right? COVID and it keeps changing and mutating and whatever. This is a new normal. Whether we have to continue getting more vaccine to sort of avoid massive illness, this is something we have to deal with. And the sports world, particularly tennis, hasn't reckoned with this situation, and whereas last year you saw the Grand Slams rally around to drag Naomi, rally around to punish Serena, and here we'll have this white dude, the worst of the worst, to get away with this shit, and they've said not a mumbling word. And this is just typical when people talk about the unfairness of tennis and these situations. And not just even tennis, not even just the Grand Slam and ITF and whatever the case may be. Because we have enough evidence to show that Nole actions were nefarious, were dodgy, and he should at the very least face some sort of punishment. He shouldn't be allowed to waltz into Tennis Australia, into Melbourne, and play when his colleagues who, have health issues, I'm sure not all of them. I know John Isner had to probably been sedated to take that vaccine, but here he is. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe we need to check other people's vaccine. But I just want to add that, what I find is interesting is that the same media that didn't even spare 2 seconds to drag, the black females are mumbling and obfuscating when it comes to writing about the situation. When tennis, when Twitter, detectives have already seen the bullshit. Even the rest of the world who don't even follow tennis no less full of shit. So I'm just saying a lot of it's not what I'm seeing being said, it's what that being said that I find so awfully interesting. And that's my last word. Andreen?
Can I just say something before Andreen wraps up, just a tiny little bit, because that I touches something that it isn't just this Nole incident. It's many things that's been happening in tennis and sport and politics, and it's the loss of trust in institutions and in people in positions of authority. And what has happened in the last 4 or 5 years has showed us how vulnerable we are to people dismantling the goodness that is in institutions and in people who serve for the public good.
Pablo, I find that, I don't want to say it this way, but I find your beliefs in those institutions somewhat idealistic, because there are tons of people in this world, tons of people who know those same institutions were never noble, were never trustworthy, and they were not there for everyone. So for us, for many of us, these institutions are just showing who they really are, in essence, because they quickly fold. They so quickly fold for Nole, just for Nole. In this case, just Nole. And I don't think he's worth it.
Well, I mean, listen, I think at the end of the day, I agree with all of you that I think the challenge for me with this situation is, what does this allow us to have to deal with as fans? I'll think about it just from a fan perspective, is that you've created, and I think Howard Bryant said it best, all of the slams could have decided on a vaccination policy and stuck to it, because the slams exist within societies, right? Within a city, within whatever the city code is, there's no reason why the slam couldn't adhere to it. But the reality is that they had to make a decision about their pocketbooks, right? That's what they were deciding. They thought that having Nole present was going to give them eyeballs for advertisers, and it was going to get them some asses in the seat.
The funny part is we know better.
I know. I mean, that's the irony of it. We totally know better. But that was the deal that they were willing to make. And I think for me, I think there's no lesson here for Nole. There's only positives for him. Because it's like, just because look at what happens. Like, this is when you thought of, just 4 years ago, y'all, when people opened the door and said, let's make a deal with this dude, nothing's gonna change us. It's not gonna change how we do business. We knew that changed everything, right? And so the moment you allow this to happen, what it means is that other people feel completely justified in circumventing. And why wouldn't they? And why shouldn't they, really? Right? Like, that's really at the end of the day what this is.
And create tons of international incidents.
And generate your fan base and let them go out on the street and do all of that. That's all that this is. And believe me, this is why, even though we started the podcast with the facts, we know the facts don't matter. I know the facts don't matter, right? And that's what this time period has taught us. Facts do not matter when you are trafficking in, like, nationalistic sentiment, hero worship, all of the things that is being
bullshit
right now. There's a lot of
tennis
insurrection. It is, right? It is a little bit of that what's happening. And I think what's interesting for me is I'm curious to see who comes after this guy, who comes next, right? Because Nole's only here for what? I mean, God forbid he's here for a long time. But I mean, why wouldn't he just shuffle this through to the political space where he's ultimately headed? But it's really interesting to watch what happens here. And I think that this is why everyone is trapped. Everyone is trapped because of all the symbolism around Nole. Number one player, Eastern Bloc country, all of these other biases and prejudices that people think exist, which he's fully exploiting, right? But I think that's why I think everyone is kind of trapped here. They're not going to be able to send him home, because the first thing is people are going to say, you're trying to stop this man from achieving greatness and blah, 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 even though he's participating in all of that. So to me, I think welcome to Trumpian tennis in the full sense of the word, right? Which is facts don't matter. None of that matters. We're
we are
here.
we are
What did I
we are
say? What did I say? What do we always
we are
say?
Yeah.
That tennis is a microcosm of the
It's
society,
exactly
sadly.
right. I mean, look at
we
the protest in the street. A fake protest for a fake event. I mean, that's
yeah.
what it was. It was a completely manufactured event. I mean, somebody should have just
Girl, that
literally
wasn't the protest.
made
That
a
was the riot. They
Bible.
were attacking cars. They were
I
mad.
mean, listen. What was the date? We should remember it like we remember January 6th. What was it for tennis though? What date was it for tennis? They were
I'm
literally
not
in the
trying to
street.
remember that,
10th.
Andreen.
No, literally
Tense.
in the street begging for the
Well,
savior of their guy. But
I
so
think that
listen, Savior
I
Nole. Actually, that's gonna be the theme, y'all.
oh god.
I agree with you. I think we are with him.
New territory.
We're in an era of post-truth
Yeah,
where the
completely. Doesn't
facts
matter.
don't matter. It is the narrative that you can drive through and the
Mhm.
forces that you can align
I think he takes it to a
to
new level though,
dominate.
because I think we've been there. We've been there when we're
No,
looking
we've
at
been
certain
there
incidents.
before with
We've been
sports,
there
but
before.
not this way. But not this way.
Not like
Right.
this.
This way.
This
Not in
has
performance art.
global consequences, whether we want to
Fantastic.
admit that or not. But I
Because
think
this is
we've
no
Amen.
all
longer personal, right? Because it's no longer
right.
internal within tennis. It speaks to
No,
we're
but
dealing
also
with a
he's
pandemic.
extrapolated. But do you see what he's done? He's extrapolated that whole "I am a victim"
Yes,
mentality. I can't do anything. Everyone's against me. And he's now pushed it out into this space where the entire world really is against him. But it's not really the case. We just want you to follow whatever mandates are there. But he's completely shifted that narrative in that really powerful way where now he's a victim of society, which has always been his own personal narrative. I'm a victim of the federal era. I'm the victim of this. But
And you
now it's
see
like
what
this
France
really
says, right?
interesting.
France is always fucking up everything. France said, you can come, even though
Of
Macron
course.
said that unvaccinated people will live in
Of course,
hell.
listen. If they think that Nole is gonna put some asses in seats, and this is why the painting things about safety versus money was such a bad dichotomy in the first place. But that's where we are. So let's enjoy it, tennis. This is welcome to the new era of tennis. Where
Yeah. All right. That's a good place to stop.
I
Reels,
love it.
take us
Let's
out.
go.
Yes, people, we have come to another exciting episode. We want to just thank our guest Pablo for being with us and bringing
my
us,
my pleasure.
we appreciate it. Pablo, now it's time to go off and sleep. I know vampires don't usually sleep this early, but I wish not for you to be, and Andreen can enjoy her 5:30, afternoon. She can still see sunlight
Asleep.
over there.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, Janine and I.
Oh,
Who got a
hello.
real phone? Who got a real
Let's-
phone?
let-
Who's doing that?
That's Novak. He disagrees with us.
Anyway,
All
Actually,
right.
no,
and I promise
sorry, hang
that,
on. It's not Novak. It's his father.
Listen, I'm not even gonna get into parenting.
Yeah, we
because you
can't
know
do
what?
that.
We gotta do
well,
what we gotta
with
do.
that,
Can't pick the parents.
this meeting is now adjourned. Okay,
Thank
it's
you.
now adjourned.
Thank you,
Good
guys.
night,
Absolute
Have a good
pleasure.
night, everyone.
Good night.
And we will be back.
Night,
Try to be
all.
back more often, Janina.
Yes.
Good night, everyone.
Oh boy. Bye bye.